In this session, I will deal with Rabindranath Tagore's Rakto Korobi, that was translated as Red Oleanders in English, and I will trace a journey from death in life to life in death in this beautiful dramatic composition. Rakto Korobi first appeared in Probashi, a Bengali journal, in 1924, and in the same year, a translation of the play by the poet himself, named Red Oleanders, was published in the Vishwabharati Quarterly. The Western critics were prompt to label Red Oleanders as a disaster. The interconnected symbols that arose from Indian life, philosophy, and religion, and the problem of rendering them in English, created a communication gap between the poet and his Western readers. Times Literary Supplement came up with the following comment, I quote, "It is frankly difficult to make anything of the symbolism. For the greater part of the time, it is quite impossible to discover what is happening." Unquote. The Saturday Review of Literature of 18th September 1926 had almost a similar view. We confess to a steadily growing sense of baffled bewilderment as we read page after page of Red Oleanders. Unquote. The Dublin evening of 2nd July 1925 considered Red Oleanders a vague drama with shadowy figures meandering through the pages. Tagore's reaction to all these criticisms is recorded in the Vishwabharati Quarterly of October 1925. He writes, I quote, "Some few criticisms of my Red Oleanders that have appeared in the English papers have convinced me that to a considerable portion of my readers in England, this play of mine seems obscure in meaning. Such a fact, I believe, usually comes as a surprise to an author, because generally a work of this nature springs from the vision that is vivid to himself and a feeling that belongs to his direct experience. It is not for me to discuss the literary qualities of this book, which, being a mere translation, can have no pretension to a permanent place as literature in a language not the author's own. However, I think, in justice to myself, I should make it clear that it has a definite meaning which legitimately claims literary expression. Red Oleanders cannot be tied down to one definite meaning. The focus in this session will be on one of the many. As I told you, the journey from death in life to life in death. A pattern, however, essentially Indian, once deciphered and explained, is bound to give this play a universal significance. Nandini, the emblem of nature, impersonal love, determination, courage, rebellion, and liberation, comes to Yakshapuri that thrives on a systematic mechanization of human resources to serve a corrupt tyranny. She acts as a catalyst for a change in a repressed society, deprived of the light of freedom and resigned to its bleak lot. The king is imprisoned behind an iron curtain of his own making. The hierarchical power structure has a governor with a band of assistants and a well-equipped army to tyrannize the diggers, and thereby force them to dig out gold from the dark recesses of the earth. The other characters who play pivotal roles in the play are the professor, Bishu, the sad musician, Chandra, the art-bound wife of Phagulal, Goshai, who uses religion to serve the purpose of the governor, and of course Ranjan, whose unseen presence in the background radiates an aura of completeness from the beginning till the end. Ranjan inspires fear and hope, hatred and love, insecurity and fulfillment in the hearts of all who perpetually wait for his arrival in Yakshapuri, either with apprehension or expectation. Everything in Yakshapuri is made up. As the professor says, I quote, "The naked is without a credential. It's made of clothes that define us." The naked is without a credential. It's made up clothes that define us. Unquote. Here comes Nandini, who is not, quote, "the sunlight gleaming through the forest thickets that surprises nobody, but the light that breaks through a cracked wall," unquote. Yakshapuri is a city under eclipse. The professor describes the shadow demon that lives in the gold caves and has eaten into it. It is not whole itself, neither does it allow anyone else to remain whole. Chandra echoes this fragmentary existence when she says, "We are closely fitted to their profits only, like husks to grains of corn, with nothing of us left over. The diggers are identified only with numbers like 47V or 69NG. The satire is stinging, and we are transported to Tagore's Tasher Desh or House of Cards. As you know, it is a satire on the rigidity of class systems during British Raj, originally written as a short story and then expanded into a dance drama or a dance opera in 1933, inspired primarily by Alice in Wonderland. Nandini is decked with red oleanders. Red for Nandini is the color of Ranjan's love, while for the professor and the system of Yakshapuri, red is a beauty that instills fear. Red is also the color of rebellion that liberates the spirit and shatters the imposed restrictions. All parts of the red oleander tree are extremely toxic and can prove to be lethal even when dried. The red oleander hence also stands for a deadly beauty. While Nandini adores the red oleander, she also knows it for certain that she needs to remain indebted to the roots that delve deep into the darkness of the earth to draw nourishment for it so that it can enjoy the light of the world above. Nevertheless, she is not ignorant of the limitations. I quote, "The living earth gives itself up in love and life and beauty, but when you rend its bosom and disturb the dead, You bring up with your booty the curse of the dark demon, blind and hard, cruel and envious. The king has the strength to pull up blocks of stone, iron and gold from the dark depths of the earth, but lacks the power of magic that manifests itself through the growing grass and the blossoming flowers. Nandini weaves a web of magic around her. Her strength lies in her softness. The king rules by the exercise of brute force. Ranjan leaves Nandini free only to hold her fast. The king spends his time in knotting the binding rope. Unfortunately, everything else can be tied except joy. If the king is a desert, parched, bare and weary, Nandini is just a tiny blade of grass. The flaming thirst of this desert licks up one fertile field after another only to enlarge itself. However, it can never annex the life of the frailest of grasses. The king desperately wants to exist without knowing the meaning of life. Cut off from life, he spends himself in repressing life. The king projects an instance of overgrown power that crushes itself inwardly by its own weight. In Nandini, the king discovers the dance rhythm of the all. The rhythm that lightens the enormous weight of matter. To that rhythm, the band of stars and planets go about, dancing from sky to sky. Kenaram Gosai, the high preacher, sent by the governor to give moral lessons to the diggers, reminds us of Mogoj Dholai, or brainwashing of the laborers in Satyajit Roy's film Hirak Rajar Deshe. And this leads us to the topsy-turvy talk of Vishu, the sad philosopher who believes there are sorrows to forget, which is the greatest of sorrows. He distinguishes between the pain of desire for the near that belongs to the animal and the sorrow of aspiration for the far that belongs to man. I quote, "That far away flame of eternal sorrow is revealed through Nandini." If he is the music, then Nandini is the hollow of the flute. Nandini's heart soars in his voice. Her pain cries in his tunes. He is the obverse side of Ranjan on which falls the shadow. And now, who is Ranjan? If the king is represented by the falcon, the symbol of brute strength, Nandini by the dove, the symbol of love, then Ranjan is the blue throat, Neelkantha, the symbol of victory. He is the culmination of love, strength and knowledge. Ranjan holds an oar in each hand and ferries Nandini across the stormy waters. He catches wild horses by the mane and rides with her through the woods. He shoots an arrow between the eyebrows of the tiger on the spring and scatters her fear with loud laughter. His life is tumultuous and he can desperately stake his all on the game. Nandini loves Ranjan, as the rudder in the water might love the sail in the sky, answering its rhythm of wind in the rhythm of waves. The king saves a frog that has remained in a hole for 3,000 years from existing forever by smashing its shelter. He thus learns the difference between living and existing, a state of death in life. Nandini tempts the king to move out of his secret chamber, the stone walls of which fall away, only to discover Ranjan lying dead, killed by the king's henchmen. In the climactic scene, the king, a prisoner of his own oppressive regime, turns against it and joins Nandini, who emerges as the stereotype of the awesome power of the eternal woman, the emblem of Shakti. Similarly, Ranjan leaves his conquering call in his death. Nandini is sure he will live again. He cannot die. As she cries, I did await his coming, and he did come. I still wait to prepare for his coming again, and he shall come again. Nandini follows Ranjan and is followed by the king, elated at his newly acquired ability to die. He cries out in joy, at last I found the meaning of death, I am saved. The professor throws away his books to follow the king, who in his words has at last had the tidings of the secret life and has gone off in quest of it. Phagulal sees the red streak, and Vishu, who prepares his last lonely journey, concludes that Nandini and Ranjan have at last been united, and it has been a red marriage. Tagore had an enlightening conversation with Pandit Khiti Mohan Sen Shastri a few days before his death on the subject matter of Rakta Korobi. On this occasion, he had quoted from the Upanishads, which preaches the indestructibility of life. He recollected an incident that had inspired the play. A red oleander tree had been accidentally crushed by pieces of discarded iron, but suddenly one day the poet saw a beautiful red oleander branch tearing through the lifeless debris, carrying a red oleander on its breast, as if it was trying to wing the world with love. The flower created, it seemed, from the blood of its cruelly pierced breast, questioned the world's ability to efface it from the surface of the earth. We are immediately reminded of Kishore, who at the beginning of the play describes the one and only red oleander tree discovered after days of search, nearly hidden away behind a rubbish heap. Tagore wrote a speech introducing the play, never delivered because the play could not be staged during his lifetime. I quote from that speech. There is an antimony between men as individuals and men as members of a class. My play is about an individual, man as a member of a class. Rakta Korobi depicts a woman named Nandini. See her emerge as an individual in the middle of oppression that surrounds her. See the tears and the laughter which rises upwards like a gargling fountain, forced to rise by the constraint at the point of issue. If you look at the whole picture, you will find enjoyment in it. Or else you can search for meanings hidden under the petals of the red oleander. If that causes a problem, the responsibility is not mine. Unquote. And then we have an interesting diary entry of 1924 on this play. I quote, "When the joyful life force that is in woman fails to inspire man's endeavors, then the mechanical element dominates the creative. That is when the machine man creates hurts human beings. That is the thought that had forced expression in my play Rock the Korobi. In Yakshapuri, man delves deep into the art to bring out gold with relentless exertion of force. The lust for unremitting acquisition is such that there is no room for what is beauteous in life. There enters woman, enters Nandini, and thus the mechanical encounters life force." Shambhumitra traces a sense of decay and waste in the last few words of the song that ends the play. "The art's pantel of dust is filled with ripe corn." He notices a definite change of tone when compared with the lines sung earlier. "Autumn's basket is heaped with corn," to quote Shambhumitra. If a faulty organization was not forced on the society, if youth was allowed a free play in its area of activity, so much of the ripe harvest would not have been scattered to the dust. There would not have been such a waste of the basketful ripe harvest. In the Bengali version of the line, "ডালে যে তোর ভরেছে আজ পাকা ফসলে," ডালা যে তোর ভরেছে আজ পাকা ফসলে, changes to ধুলার আঁচল ভরেছে আজ পাকা ফসলে. The renowned poet Shankha Ghosh contradicts Shambhumitra, focusing on the words achol, which means mantle, and bhoreche, which means filled, as indicative of abundance and fulfillment. He traces an indestructible optimism in the ending lines of the play. The marks of blood, red oleanders, and ripe harvest all mingle and combine into a sense of collection, not in any metaphysical sense, not in any supernatural sense, but just in this sense that some deaths may be unavoidable in conflicts during social transition, but they can never silence us. They can serve as our inspiration for the next line of action. And so we hear his deathless voice, his unwasted life. The name Nandini in Bengali means a giver of joy. And it is the joy that arises out of death, of mere existence, and the celebration of life as it should be lived, that sums up the final impression of this richly allegorical play, the stage worthiness of which has often been questioned. Thank you.